John. Last name Wilbanks, Wilbanks.
Where do you work, sir?
The Gwinnett County District Attorney's Office.
In what capacity?
I'm a criminal investigator for the Drug and Gang Task Force.
What law enforcement experience do you have?
In civilian law enforcement, I started in 1998, so this is my 27th year. I started with the Gwinnett County Police Department in that year. I did my first 17 years there. 13 out of the 17 years I did robbery and homicide investigations. And in 2015, I came here to the District Attorney's Office. I had a short retirement and then came back.
What are your responsibilities currently with the District Attorney's Office?
As a criminal investigator assigned to the unit I'm in, I get cases from the point of a warrant being taken and or someone being arrested for a felony offense that falls into a certain category of crimes that comes to our unit. And then I handle working that case up and getting it ready for trial as we are here today. So there are police investigators that handle it initially in a lot of cases. And then once it comes to our office, we help get it across the finish line, I guess you could say, if there's any additional interviews that need to be done or additional evidence that needs to be sought. And from time to time, I do work like I did in this case, which is looking at phone records.
What training and experience do you have that qualifies you to look at phone records?
I've got between 150, 200 hours of training regarding different types of examination of phone records and or cellular devices. So that's through a number of companies. One of those companies is a company called Celebrite, which teaches us about phones, how they work, and how data can get extracted from the actual devices. But I've also been trained by the FBI's CAST team, which is their cellular analysis team that the FBI uses. I've been trained by other civilian training companies as well. So it's not one source for my information. I've gone through a variety of training for that.
As part of the FBI training and the other training you referred to, are you required to test your proficiency in those matters?
Yes, you do. Well, you do practical exercises in there, and there is some testing as well. Yes.
And do they give certifications once you successfully pass their courses?
In some cases, it's a certification. In some cases, it's just a diploma that you've passed the course.
And do you have certifications as it relates to the examination of cell phones?
Yes.
And about how many cell phone examinations have you done over your career?
I would say it's in the dozens of actual downloads, extractions, but I mean, I've looked at in my career, I'd probably put in individual device extractions, probably hundreds.
And let's distinguish between the person that testified before you, Detective Durenzio. Are you familiar with him?
I am.
What he did and what you did. Detective Durenzio has testified about Cellbrite records. Are you going to be testifying about Cellbrite records or something else?
I'm going to be testifying about what happens on the cellular network once a device is being used within the network.
Okay. And have you done that before as an expert witness?
Yes.
Judge, at this time we tender Mr. Wilbanks as an expert in cell phone data examination.
Judge, I don't have any objection there.
No, I have no objection, Your Honor.
No objection. All right. Investigator Wilbanks will be tendered as an expert, qualified as an expert.
Detective Wilbanks, as it relates to this case, were you able to get the certified business records involving 470-886-5190 business records of Josiah Hughley from T-Mobile?
Yes.
Were you able to get 470-342-9346 business records from AT&T of David Booker?
Yes.
Were you able to get 678-542-6398 business records of T-Mobile regarding Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Were you able to get cell phone records, business records 470-839-1041 business records of Jeremiah Pledger's T-Mobile again?
Yes.
I'm going to share this with previously marked as State's Exhibit number 83. Have you had an opportunity to examine State's 83?
Yes, I created this exhibit.
And that you created, is that a download of the business records of the companies that we just mentioned on the phones we just mentioned?
Yes, this is where I put the records from that I used in this case.
Thank you. Your Honor, we tender State's 83 at this time.
No objection, Judge.
Yes, no, I guess not, Judge.
Okay, State's Exhibit 83 is admitted without objection.
Mr. Wilbanks, when you are looking at the business records for cell phone companies, do they have a lot of data points?
Yes, quite a lot.
Hundreds,
Hundreds,
sometimes thousands?
thousands.
When you're able to take those voluminous records, and are you able to make summaries and charts to more easily explain it to the jury?
Yes, in fact, if I just put up the data, it would probably mean almost nothing to you just to look at data. It comes in the form of spreadsheets, and I think you may have used the word voluminous, and that's a good explanation.
I'd like to
Show you what's been previously marked and shown to defense counsel as States 84. Do you recognize States 84?
I do.
How do you recognize States 84?
I created this exhibit as well.
And is that an exhibit created of the voluminous records contained in States 83?
It is.
Your Honor, this time we tender States 84.
No objection, Your Honor.
State's 84, excuse me, is admitted without objection.
Now, when we're talking about States 84, did you do a PowerPoint presentation?
I did.
And I'd like to pull that up, Your Honor, publish States 83 and have walk through his report. If I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Just 1 second. I'll give you the PowerPoint clicker.
Okay.
You got a pointer. Feel free to step down once it comes up, and we'll walk it through.
All right.
Give you a heads up in just a second. Johnny, you want to, oops, sorry. There. Excuse me, we have to keep-
You're fine.
I told you we'd have at least one IT issue during the trial. If this is the only one we'll have, I'll be happy.
About to come up. We're good to go.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can I stand, John?
Absolutely. Can everyone see, or do you want me to turn one light off for the glare? Yes, okay. Sometimes there's a glare on it. Is that better? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this first slide is just orienting you to the data that I looked at. I reviewed Investigator Harrison's investigator's report to get information about what I needed to look for in the data, and then I reviewed these phone numbers as I understood them to be associated with the different subjects in the case.
There you go.
All right, so the first phone number that we'll look at is the device I understood to be associated with Mr. Booker at 470-342-9346. So in this particular phone, it's an AT&T phone. We're going to have what's called CSLI, that stands for Cell Site Location Information, and we obtained what's called LOCDOBOR data. That stands for Location Database of Record. So to begin to explain to you what you're going to see in the slides that come forward, the different phone companies use different technologies. They don't all use the same type of technology. LOCDOBOR is a type of technology that only AT&T uses of the big three that we have in this area. And I'll explain further what that is. And then cell site location, every phone company, every cellular network provider is going to have cell site location information. And so this may be a good appropriate time to explain how the phone works with the network so that you can further understand that.
If you would.
Okay, so at any given time, when
You can sit down if you need to, Detective Wilkins.
So any given time, when you are using your cell phone and it's on, it has to have, in order for it to be effective and you to be able to make or receive a call, it needs to have a way to get into the network through radio frequency signals, okay? And so in order for that to happen, there has to be some communication or connectivity between your device and the network. When we talk about cell site location information, what we're talking about is that record of a transaction between your device and the network. The network keeps a log or an accounting of that information. We get that information from them through a Superior Court search warrant. And once we obtain that information, we can then begin to look at it and analyze it through a software that I use called PinLink or PLX. Now, the information contained in the cell site location information is things like the date and time of a call and the duration of the call, different codes about what took place in the network with the call. But what's going to be very important in this case is that LI part, or that location information part. That's the data about what access point to the network the phone communicated through in order to make the call. You've probably all driven along the highways and seen the big giant towers that your phones connect to the towers through. There are different types of towers. Most towers are broken down into sectors around the tower. So we can look at the phone records and we can determine that a call was routed or took place through not only the location of a tower, but through one of the sectors on that tower. So in other words, we're breaking down 360-degree coverage into smaller components through the different radio frequency panels on the tower. There is, like I said, a variety of types of towers. Some of them are tuned to cover activity in a very close area. Some of them communicate over a very long distance. And so it just depends on the type of terrain you're talking about, the type of infrastructure you're talking about, the nature of how many people might use a particular area. So in this case, you're going to see a lot of these slides are broken down into a 3-mile distance from the tower out to the edge of a shaded area that I'll demonstrate that on. But that's not always necessarily indicative of a phone being all the way out at a 3-mile area. What I'm going to show you is some shaded areas, and that the device could have been anywhere in that shaded area. I can't tell you exactly where it is. I just know that it's reasonable to believe it could have been somewhere in that shaded area. Now, there are, as I said, different technologies. One of the earlier slides you'll see in here is what's called an omnidirectional tower. I only saw one of those towers on the records in this case, and it will be on Mr. Booker's phone records. Those towers handle communication in a very small area, small geographic area. This one, and this presentation will be in downtown Atlanta. And that makes sense because in built-up urban areas, you have lots of buildings, lots of infrastructure, and you need more access points so that the communication doesn't get broken down trying to travel through a building or something like that. So it's an easier way to access the network. So that's our cell site location information that we'll talk about. In this case, I'll talk about loc-to-bore as well. Now, loc-to-bore, location, database of record. Remember I told you only AT&T uses that term of the big three we have in Atlanta. T-Mobile and Verizon will use a timing advanced data. They collect it, they call it something different, but it's basically the same thing. It's what happens when you're not actually using your phone to do anything. The CSLI is when you're actually using your phone to interact with the network in some way. You've either made a phone call you've received a phone call, a text, something like that. With the timing advance or the loc-to-bore, what's happening is the network is measuring a signal from your device to determine a general idea of where it might find you if and when you need to get into the network or it needs to route a phone call to you. So that information, loc-to-bore or timing advance, is very limited in duration. In other words, if I wanted to go back, I'll give you a hard example. T-Mobile only keeps it currently for 30 days. So unlike your cell site location information, which they may have for years, they don't keep timing advance or loc-to-bore that long. So it's robust data kept for a very brief period of time. So as we go forward, there will be demonstrations of both types of data in here, and I'll point out the difference.
Okay. If you go to the next slide, please, sir. Tell us what we're looking at.
Okay, so in this slide, at the top of each of the slides, I'll give you a description of what's taking place up here. We're going to stay on Mr. Booker's device, and I want to go individually through each user's devices, and we'll talk about 2 days. We'll talk about July 9th, and we'll talk about July 10th of 2022. So in July 9th, what we have here is the device I understood to be associated with Mr. Booker. It had loc-to-bore data in downtown Atlanta at or about in the proximity of 635 Lindbergh Drive in Atlanta. And I understood from the reports that there was information related to subjects involved in the case having been at this Texaco station on July 9th. And this is demonstrating at 1:43. When I looked at the data, I found that his device could have been there. You will see here that you get different measurements. So we have different measurements of the size of the area that the loc-to-bore has measured. What's happened is in the data we get from AT&T, they give us a latitude and a longitude, and then they give us what they believe to be a degree of accuracy that's within so many meters or more. And so this is just a visual representation of their minimal measurement of that location. So here, this larger one is at 1:16 a.m., still at 1:16 a.m. with the second measurement, and at 1:43, I believe it is a.m., we have it north of here on, it's like Piedmont, down to that.
Okay, you talked about loc-to-bore. What about CSLI? Did Mr. Booker make a phone call during this time period?
Yes, and as we go forward in the additional slides, during the time period of this, we'll break down as we go forward each of the different types of technology for each device. So, CSLI, remember, we're only going to have that when the person actually uses the device. So, I found where there was an outgoing phone call from Mr. Booker's device to the number associated with Mr. Miles Collins, and that took place at 49 minutes after midnight, so 12:49 a.m. on July 9th, and it placed it here, a location south and west of the Texaco station, but this is, as I say, at 12:49 a.m. I'm going to bring, I did an outset of, or a close-up of where the base of this tower is right here, and I did this so that when we later look at Mr. Miles Collins' records, you will see that his hit a similar, for this call, his phone registered a similar geographic area. It'll be very close to here, so when we get to that point, I'll be referencing back, and that's why I did this. You'll see that in his case, being on AT&T's network, his tower and sector was just north and east of the intersection of I-20 and Fulton Industrial. When we get to Mr. Collins, you'll see that his is just south on a T-Mobile tower. But remember, those are different carriers and can be on different towers.
Were you able to capture a picture of the tower under consideration that you've talked about?
You can barely see it here in this image,
Right.
but it's barely there.
If you'll advance to the next slide.
All right. So for Mr. Booker, for July 9th, there was another phone call at 1:17 a.m. and that placed his device communicating with this tower here. And I've shown you a photograph of this tower because as you look at this, you may think, well, that doesn't look like anything close to what I see when I drive down the road. You will find that in particular with AT&T, they've been installing these types of radio access locations into the network. This is, as you see, this is in a more built-up area in Atlanta. These types of towers don't communicate over miles. They tend to communicate over hundreds of meters distance. So this one has a much smaller degree of likelihood of communication as far as distance goes.
Anything else significant about that slide?
No.
Okay. So we'll go to the next slide and move forward to the data.
Control.
Thank you. Tell us what we're looking at here.
So as you can see here, this is going to be Mr. Booker's phone. We're now on July 10th for him. From 10:07 a.m. through 11:20 a.m. What I noticed was I looked at the data and I wanted to know when I began to see something related to that phone moving on that day. And what I noticed was at about 10:07, I could see look board data showing it, the device moving a little bit south, a little bit east towards Lithonia before then turning around and traveling slightly northwest and then north to an area as if you could be going towards the QT in this case. And this is the last measurement at 11:20 that I would see for about 30 minutes, and I'll demonstrate that on the next slide.
Well, in this slide, before we advance,
You talked about look to bore versus CSLI, and if I understood you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, look to bore is kind of passing of the time from cell tower to cell tower, is that about right?
Well, it's
Even if you're not on the phone?
you're not on the phone, but it's periodically measuring information about where it believes the device might be geographically in order to give it access to the network. And what I've typically seen is when the device is moving, there tends to be more data during that time period. That's been my experience from looking at a lot of records. So that's why it almost looks like a breadcrumb trail, as if it's going in that direction.
And when we're looking at that map right there, is that consistent with any major thoroughfares in Atlanta?
Yes, it's consistent with I-20 to 285 and then 285 to probably the Street Industrial area roughly.
all right, so this goes from 10:07 a.m. to 11:20 a.m. Do you recall when the shooting occurred?
I believe it was at about 12:38 p.m.
All right. So let's advance. Before we go here, we did not have a slide on CSLI during that time period. Would you expect to see CSLI with someone's phone if they're riding in the same car?
No, I wouldn't expect to see two people call each other in the same car.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next slide.
So this slide demonstrates that from 11:20 to 11:50 a.m. for Mr. Booker, there is a gap in the data, and I've announced that here. So this is what a loc-de-bore report looks like from AT&T. And what you'll see here is military time. The records are provided in military time, but you may be thinking, why are you talking about 11:20 to 11:50 when in fact over here it says 15:20 to 15:50, which is military time from 3:20 to 3:50. Well, the explanation for that is that T-Mobile and AT&T keep their records in what's called UTC time. UTC time, Uniform Time Coordinated, is a standard timekeeping method for phone companies and other companies as well. And so in order to get the time zone that any device was in, you have to convert from UTC to your time zone. And in this case, we're converting to Eastern Standard Time. At this time of the year, I would have to subtract 4 hours from that to get the actual Eastern Standard Time for the records and for the device. I know it's in the Eastern Time Zone because I can tell from the location of the device. So there's no question it's in the Eastern Time Zone. And so I do that conversion, and then I come up with the right number in order to do the mapping. This is something that I can have PLX do for me automatically, and then I check it to see if it's done accurately. but for 30 minutes, we're not gonna have any in his records. So there was nothing to map for that next 30 minutes.
Next slide, please.
So the next time that we're gonna have information regarding Loc DeBoer is at 11:50 a.m. from Mr. Booker. And here I've drawn out that radius to 600 meters to reflect what's in the records, although it could be outside of that. But that's what the records are telling me. And it shows that it's within the general area of the QT of interest in this case.
And I want to make sure I understand.
So the cell tower under consideration is the center of this circle, is that correct?
No, so what's happening is the phone is measuring what it believes to be its geographic location.
Oh,
And-
the company believes that?
Right.
Okay.
The company says it believes the device is probably here, but it could be anywhere in here, and it may be a little bit outside of that, but that's the phone company's best estimate of where it would likely be if it needed to communicate with the phone.
So if I understand you right, the QT, right there at the forum, is within the range of possibility for his cell phone.
Right.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next slide.
So this is all the Loc DeBoer I saw on the phone between 11:52 and 12:30. So to summarize what I saw in the data, what I saw was at 11:52 a.m., AT&T had measured the device here, close to the area of the QT, and then AT&T measured the device moving away. So that by 12:25, it had moved south back towards roughly the 285 area, before then returning by 12:30 back to that same area of the QT.
So it went down and then back up?
Went down and came back up. And I will point out to you, I believe it's Mr. Hughley's device, when I looked at it, it did almost exactly the same thing. And it's on a different network. Different records. The two phone companies don't keep records together, yet the records will reflect that both devices did something very similar.
All right, let's go to the next slide.
So this is by 12:31. Loc DeBoer for Booker's device shows it two measurements in that minute time frame, and this is a visual depiction of its measurement being at or around the area.
Why do we have two concentric shaded areas, sir?
Well, because there's two measurements, and it returned two different levels of certainty. So one measurement had one level of certainty, the other one had a different level of certainty.
Okay, next slide.
So this is showing all of the Loc DeBoer data from 12:32 to 12:39, with all of that data showing AT&T's belief that the device was somewhere in that general area of the QT.
Thank you. Then what happened?
And then what we saw was that starting at 12:40, I could see where there was information in the records that tended to show that the device moved out of the area generally associated with that QT, and the device registered on AT&T's network to be somewhere close to Turnberry Place in the Stonecrest area, which I understood from the report to be a location of interest in the evidence.
So I'm not seeing the same path of travel afterwards as I did beforehand. Does this indicate a different path of travel?
Well, we have less data in here, and it could be, but there's less data overall in here as well. But it could have been 285.
My memory is that on the other slide, that the phone was tracking 20 to 85. Does this show 20 to 85?
No, I believe it showed 285 in the previous one, I believe. Oh, let me go back and look at it. I believe that's the case.
That's my bad. Thank you. But as far as the relevant times, 12:40 in the QT area, 11:13 down by Turnberry Place and Stonecrest?
Yes, by 1:13 p.m. it was back in an area disassociated with QT.
All right, and if you could go to the next slide.
So this is zooming in to only show you that one point at 1:13 p.m. This center again is AT&T's measurement of where it thinks the device is and its location around Turnberry Place address.
Thank you. Go to the next slide.
So what I noticed is I wanted to see where the device registered after that, and this is from 1:37 p.m., 1:45 p.m., and then 1:45 again a little bit later in that minute time frame, and the device seems to be moving away from Turnberry Place by 1:37 to 1:45. We see what appears to be moving away.
Go to the next slide, please.
So now we're going to look at cell site location information for that device for the date of July 10th. All previous slides we've talked about are look-to-board data. We're now going to show you something that looks different. Now you're not going to have that center location of the latitude and longitudinal point where AT&T thinks the device is and the degree of certainty. We're now going to have the cell site location information, which shows you that tower located at the center point here and a sector in the area where the device made a call, registered on the network. This call here is at 12:21, 12:23. This one was at 12:22. So we've backed up a little bit now. We've looked at the look-to-board all the way through. Now we're going to back up and look at the cell site location information.
Investigator Wilbanks,
We talked about CSLI and the cell towers, and you mentioned that there's different phases or faces of the tower. Are they pied like in three? Do they have pies?
Can be that, it can be smaller. Generally, it's in 3 parts, but it can be smaller than that, depending on technology. Or you could have one, like I say, an omnidirectional tower, like we talked about earlier. This is a reflection of the phone records combined with a master tower list from the phone company to tell us where it's at.
So when I'm looking at this cell tower, I notice that it's a third, at least to me, it's a third of the circle. Does this indicate that it's not within this third of the circle going to the lower right? Is that what this indicates?
So what happens with your radio frequencies is it's not a hard line in reality the way you see it here. This is the only visual depiction I can give you of it. In reality, what happens is that there can be there's almost surely going to be some overlap in between sectors, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be miles or half mile, anything like that. It's going to be fairly close to those boundaries. So the best information I can give you is that I can say that it's likely somewhere in this area for this call at 12:23. I can't tell you exactly where it was when it made the phone call. Or this was an incoming call, but I can't tell you where that device was. I can just tell you that this is my best just visual representation of where it could be.
all right, let's go to the next slide.
So this is from 12:23 to 12:24. 12:23, there was a call here on this tower, this sector, and then 12:24, it had shifted a little bit south of there to this tower and this sector, covering an area that would be, if you were on Beach Street Industrial Boulevard, you would be covered by that tower. This is, I found consistency between the look-to-bore and the CSLI, because we saw with the look-to-bore, it did the exact same thing. It went south and then it turned around and went north.
Thank you. Next slide.
And so I didn't have any additional cell site location information until 12:56. This was after I understood the reported time of the murder. So by 12:56, the device registers here, an area very south of the QT on a tower in a sector that is closer to Turnberry Place than it is to the QT.
And did you have information as to Mr. Booker's residence?
I did, and I think it's in the later slides, and
Yes.
that's moving in the direction of his residence as well.
Can we go to the next slide?
And this slide demonstrates that the next time that there is a phone call, it will be an outgoing phone call. It will have occurred at 1:47 p.m., and it's a tower along Covington Highway here, and a tower in a sector that, if you were at home, it would be consistent by that time. it will be consistent with using a tower locally. And so that's the totality of the records I saw for Mr. Booker, relevant to what I understood to be those 2 days of time.
Actual text, things like that would be taken off of a cell phone extraction that Randy had done.
It would, to whatever extent that existed, and it's a good point. Looking at the records, one of the things that the phone companies generally don't keep is location information related to text messaging. So if there was a text, you would not see it reflected here. You would see that reflected in the phone records with no location information associated with it.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about Mr. Miles Collins' phone.
Okay, so the 678-542-6398 number, the records that I was provided that had come from T-Mobile, there was no timing advance data in those records. The phone companies sometimes have that type of data, sometimes they don't. But they did have, and generally always do, the cell site location information. And they didn't have anything that we call data sessions, which is use of data over the network. There was no data sessions provided in the records that I obtained. So for him, it's only going to be the cell site location.
All right, what did that show you?
So the first thing I looked at was that July 9th date that we talked about. If you remember earlier, I told you that I would have seen, or I would see some consistency between that phone call between the number associated with Miles Collins and the one associated with Mr. Booker. So this outgoing phone call from the 6398 number to Mr. Booker's phone, registered here, Southwest Atlanta area, in a tower in a sector that was very consistent with where Mr. Booker's device showed. If you remember, I showed you a tower in a sector here for his device on the AT&T network, just north and east, and on T-Mobile's network, Mr. Collins' device registered here.
Next slide, please.
So there was no data between 12:50 a.m. and 3:49 a.m. And this is just me showing you in the records. This is what the actual CSLI records from T-Mobile look like. I'm going to point out again that time. So remember what I said earlier, we've got to subtract that 4 hours to get to the right time. So when I subtract 4 from 4:50 a.m., I get 12:50 a.m. And then it doesn't register any other phone calls on the network until 3:49 a.m. So the period I understood to be relevant at the Texaco, there was no data to make any determination during that time for his device.
So T-Mobile uses UTC time as well?
T-Mobile uses UTC time as well. So for both of those, there has to be a conversion. And they make it easy for us. They tell us up here in the instructions that that's what we need to do.
Okay, next slide.
There was some cell site location information for the following day, July 10th. I found a couple phone calls. This here at a tower in a sector in the Lithonia area. That call takes place at 10:06 a.m. It's an outgoing phone call from that device. And it's in the general area that could be consistent with his residence if he was there. By 11:23 a.m., the device had traveled clearly north of there to an area that wasn't, I could not say at the QT, but could be closer to that area than his residence.
Okay, and I just
Just want to make sure. This is CSLI and not Locabar, is that
Right.
correct? You couldn't get Locabar off of Mr. Collins' phone?
So T-Mobile calling a timing advance, they didn't have any for that time period according to the records that I received.
And Locabar would be the things that would indicate a baton handoff from tower to tower?
Well, not a handoff per se, but a location measurement
Yeah.
process. And T-Mobile is going to look differently. When we get to another T-Mobile device that will have it, it's going to look different, but it's the same general concept.
all right. Next slide, please.
So there were several phone calls from 12:51 p.m. That's the next event I saw in that device through 1:02 p.m. These were all phone calls an outgoing phone call at 12:51 PM to the number I understood associated with Ms. Pleasure. At 12:57 PM, an incoming phone call to the device from the number I understood to be Ms. Pleasure. And then at 1:02 PM, an incoming call from the phone number I understood to be Ms. Pleasure. And what we can tell here is that we started at 12:51, and by the time we've ended in this time period, we're at 1:02, and the device has clearly moved south, slightly southeast.
Okay, thank you. Next phone call. I'm sorry, next slide.
So from 12:24 to, from 1:24 PM through 1:26 PM, we've got 4 phone calls that took place with the device. All of them on a tower and a sector here, associated with an area generally in the Lithonia near I-20 area, and it was an area that would be consistent with the Turnberry Place address if the device was in that area.
Did you have a chance to review Josiah Hughley's phone?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through that.
So for Josiah Hughley, the 470-865-190 number, this is going to be a T-Mobile account, just like the last one we talked about, except his records, there were some data station data, and there was some timing advance data. And again, that data session is just getting on the internet, watching YouTube or something on the device that would have interacted with the network. So first on his device, just like the others, I looked at July 9th. And what I found was that there was lots of timing advance data on the device from 12 AM through 1:43 AM. And all of that data did not place it in or around that Texaco. And in fact, I would say there's no evidence to show that Mr. Hughley's device was in or around that data. That was timing advance. This is a data session that registered with the tower and a sector, placing it, the device in the area consistent with the Panthersville area. Again, no evidence that it was in or around the Texaco.
Right.
And finally, cell site location information. There was also a phone call. It was an outgoing phone call at 1:15 AM. And that outgoing phone call registered with a tower and sector, again, in that Panthersville area generally, and not an area consistent with the Texaco.
Next.
All right, now, this is going to be timing advance data from the device from 10 AM through 11:25 AM. And what I saw was something very consistent with what we saw with Mr. Booker's device. Even though Mr. Booker's device was on AT&T and this is T-Mobile, what we saw was location information that placed it traveling in from an area here, first going south to southeast, just like with Mr. Booker's device, and then traveling north to the area of Peachtree Corners.
Thank you.
And this is timing advance data for that last few minutes leading up to 11:25 AM. Now, when you look at this, it looks different than the loc-de-bore. With the loc-de-bore, we had a location, and then we had a degree of accuracy or an estimate. With timing advance, we can get a location. We do have some GPS location information in here, but with their records, the way that we map them is that they give us a tower and a sector, and they give us a degree of accuracy of how far off of that tower and sector the network believes that the device is located. So their records reflect visually a little bit differently than what loc-de-bore does. But to summarize what we're seeing here is it's going in the area towards the.
Thank you. Next slide.
And this is just that final location measurement at 11:25 AM. And so this is all the data that I saw from 11:25 through 11:50. It would seem apparent to me that the device is moving around, but it's generally somewhere around the area. And then from 11:51 to 11:52, what I saw in the records was that the phone seemed to do something just like I saw Mr. Booker's phone do, in that it began to move south and southwest. If someone were on Peachtree Parkway at about that time, this would be consistent with that movement, moving away from 11:51 to 12:31, we saw same thing I saw on Mr. Booker's device. First, the phone started up here at 11:51, moved southwest, furthest location at 12:26 p.m., and then by 12:31, it had moved north again, back in general direction of which it traveled. And then by 12:32, it's registering in an area geographically close to the QT.
Thank you.
This just shows from 12:32 to 12:38, the device showing, the network believing the device was in or around that area in Peachtree Farms. And then by 12:38, the network believes the device has moved away. And then here I'm mapping all the cell site location, all the timing advance data from 12:38 to 1:14 p.m. And we saw the device move south, slightly southeast, back in the area of that three-band or flat phone area.
Now, I know not all the coordinates are consistent because Mr. Booker's phone had CSLI, but do those points, the start and ending points, are they consistent with Mr. Booker's movement?